The evening sky was painted with soft shades of orange and purple, the kind of beauty most people love to pause and admire. But for her, the beauty was something she barely had time to notice. Life for a single mother with a young child was not about sunsets or slow walks. It was about survival. Every day felt like a test she had to pass, a race she had to run, and somehow she was always running out of breath but never allowed to stop. She worked 2 jobs. In the mornings, she cleaned offices, making sure everything looked polished and perfect for people who would never even know her name. In the evenings, she worked at a grocery store, stocking shelves and standing at the register with a tired but polite smile. By the time she walked home at night, her feet ached, her back hurt, and her mind was heavy with all the things she still had to figure out. Rent, school supplies for her little girl, an overdue bill that threatened to cut off the lights. Her small apartment wasn't much, but it was home. The walls were plain, the furniture was secondhand, and the paint was peeling in the corners, but she had done her best to make it warm. A small rug in the living room, some curtains she found on sale, and the drawings her daughter taped to the fridge. That was all it took to give the place a heart. It wasn't luxury, but it was filled with love. And every night, as she tucked her child into bed, she whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, that things would get better, that she would always find a way. The truth was, she often felt invisible. People passed her by every day, at the bus stop, in the store, on the street, and rarely looked her in the eye. She wasn't bitter about it, not really. Life had taught her that not everyone had the time or space to notice someone else's struggles. But it also taught her something else. Even when no one noticed her, she would always notice others. That was just who she was. It showed in small ways. When she had only a little food left, she shared it with her neighbor who had none. When she saw someone at the bus stop shivering, she offered the extra scarf she carried in her bag. Even when she had almost nothing, she found something to give. Some people told her she was too soft, too trusting, too generous for her own good, but she didn't agree. For her, kindness was not about what you had. It was about who you were. One particular evening, as she walked home after her shift at the grocery store, her daughter held her hand and hummed a little tune she learned at school. The streets were quiet, with most people already home for dinner. Streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the sidewalk. She adjusted the worn-out bag on her shoulder and kept walking, thinking about what leftovers she could turn into dinner that night. That's when she noticed him. An old gentleman stood near the corner of the block, looking around in confusion. His clothes were neat, though a little out of place for the neighborhood. He wore a long coat, and his shoes, though scuffed with dust, looked like they once belonged to someone of importance. His eyes, however, told the real story. They looked lost, like someone had taken him out of a familiar world and placed him in one where nothing made sense. He turned in circles slowly, his hands trembling slightly as if he wasn't sure which way to go. She paused, her daughter tugging at her hand. Most people would have kept walking. After all, it was getting dark and she still had to get home, feed her child, and prepare for another long day tomorrow. But something inside her wouldn't let her move past him. She could see in his face the same kind of helplessness she had often felt herself, and she remembered how much it meant when someone, even a stranger, chose to stop and help. "Mom," her daughter whispered. "Why is that man standing there?" She bent down and whispered back, "I don't know, baby, but he looks like he needs some help." Then, standing straight again, she gently guided her daughter forward and approached the old gentleman. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, not wanting to frighten him. "Are you okay? Do you need help finding something?" The man blinked at her, his expression cloudy. For a moment he didn't answer. Then, in a shaky voice, he muttered, I don't know where I am. I was walking and then..." His words trailed off, his eyes searching the streets like they might suddenly explain everything. Her heart ached at the sight of him. He reminded her of her grandfather, who had passed away years ago. She couldn't imagine what it must feel like to be old, lost and alone in a place that didn't make sense anymore. She offered a warm smile. "That's all right," she said gently. "We'll figure it out. Do you remember your address? Or someone we can call?" He shook his head, looking embarrassed. I can't remember. Everything feels mixed up." She could feel her daughter pressing closer to her leg, sensing the tension but also watching curiously. She didn't want to leave him there, not like this. But she also didn't know who he was or where he belonged. Still, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't just walk away. "Come on," she said softly, her voice full of kindness. "There's a little diner just down the street. Let's sit there for a bit and maybe things will come back to you." The old man hesitated, then nodded slowly. She guided him carefully, her daughter on one side and the gentleman on the other. They walked to the diner, the warm glow from its windows spilling out onto the sidewalk. Inside, she found a booth near the back and helped him sit down. The waitress came over, raising an eyebrow at the unusual group, but she didn't ask questions. The single mom ordered a cup of tea for the man and a small plate of food. She didn't really have money to spare, but something told her it was the right thing to do. As the old man sipped his tea with shaky hands, he looked at her and whispered, "Why are you helping me?" "You don't even know me," she smiled gently. "Because you look like you need help. And that's reason enough." He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to read her heart. Then he lowered his eyes and nodded quietly. He didn't speak much after that, but the gratitude in his silence said more than words ever could. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know where he came from or what his story might be. All she knew was that he was a lost old gentleman, and in that moment he needed someone. And for her, being that someone was never a question, it was simply what she did. The diner smelled of coffee and fresh bread, a mix of comfort and warmth that made the small space feel like home to anyone who walked through its doors. The lights were dim but cozy, and the sound of clinking dishes and quiet conversations filled the air. She sat across from the old gentleman, her daughter next to her, and kept a gentle smile on her face even though inside she was still worried about him. The old man lifted the teacup carefully, as though afraid it might slip from his hands. He blew on it before taking a slow sip. His hands trembled a little, but his eyes softened as the warmth spread through him. He didn't say much, but every now and then he would glance at her as if searching for answers in her face. She didn't push him. Sometimes people needed silence more than words. Her daughter, curious and full of innocence, finally spoke up. "Do you live around here, sir?" she asked in her sweet little voice. The man gave her a faint smile. "I think I do. Or maybe not," he said softly. "I'm not sure anymore." His words trailed off, and the confusion in his tone made her heart sink. The mom leaned forward kindly. "It's okay. We'll figure it out together. You're safe here." The waitress came back, placing a small plate of soup and bread in front of the gentleman. She gave the mom a look that clearly asked if everything was all right, but the mom just nodded politely. She didn't want to explain his situation to strangers. It felt personal, and besides, she didn't want the man to feel embarrassed. The old gentleman ate slowly, like each bite took effort. The mom watched quietly, remembering the times when she too had been grateful for a warm meal after a long, hard day. Her daughter swung her legs under the table, humming a tune softly, filling the air with a small kind of joy that even the old man seemed to notice. He looked at the little girl with tenderness in his tired eyes, as if her innocence reminded him of something precious he had long forgotten. After a while, the mom pulled out her small, worn-out phone. She decided to call the local police station, not because she wanted to hand the old man over, but because maybe they could help him find his family. When she explained the situation, the officer on the line assured her they would send someone to check in. She hung up and turned back to the gentleman. "They'll be here soon," she said softly. "Maybe they can help figure out where you live." The old man looked a little uneasy, his brows furrowing. "I don't want to cause trouble," he murmured. She reached out, gently patting his hand. "You're not causing trouble. Everyone needs help sometimes. I know what that feels like." For the first time, his lips curled into a genuine smile. It was faint, but it was real. "You're very kind," he whispered. "Not many people would have stopped." She shook her head. "I don't believe that. There are still good people out there. But even if there weren't, I couldn't just walk past. My heart wouldn't let me." Her daughter looked up at her and then back at the man. "My mom helps everybody," she said proudly, "even when she's tired." The old man chuckled softly, the sound raspy but full of warmth. "You're very lucky to have her," he told the little girl. The child nodded, her eyes shining. Minutes passed and the diner grew quieter as people finished their meals and left. The mom noticed the old man's eyes darting to the door, as though he was afraid of something. She leaned in again. "Is there someone you'd like us to call for you? A friend, family?" He hesitated, then shook his head slowly. I can't remember." His voice was strained, almost like it hurt him to admit it. It's like there's a fog in my mind. She nodded, her heart aching. That's all right. You're not alone anymore. We'll get through this. Her daughter rested her small hand on the man's arm, her innocent gesture surprising both adults. It's okay, sir. You can sit with us until you remember. The man's eyes grew misty at the kindness of the child. He placed his shaky hand over hers and closed his eyes for a moment, as if holding on to the warmth of that simple touch. The mom felt a lump in her throat. There was something about him, something beyond his confusion and frailty. It was the way he looked at them, the way he responded to kindness like he hadn't felt it in a long time. Soon, 2 officers arrived, their uniforms sharp under the diner lights. They approached the booth and spoke gently to the old man, asking him questions about his name, his home, where he had been. But his answers were vague, incomplete, lost in that same fog. The officers sighed, clearly unsure what to do. They suggested bringing him to the station, where maybe someone had already reported him missing. The mom could see the fear flicker across the gentleman's face. He didn't want to go. His hands tightened around the cup of tea like it was his anchor. She leaned toward one of the officers and whispered, "He's scared. Please be gentle with him." The officer nodded respectfully. "We'll take good care of him, ma'am." "Don't worry." Before leaving, the old man turned to her. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. "Thank you. For seeing me. For not walking past." She felt her eyes sting but held back the tears. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "You're not alone." The officers guided him out slowly and carefully. The mom and her daughter watched as he disappeared through the diner door into the night. For a long moment they sat in silence, the air heavy with unspoken feelings. Her daughter finally broke the quiet. "Do you think he'll be okay, Mom?" The mom took a deep breath, looking out the window where the streetlights glowed. "I hope so, baby. Sometimes just a little kindness can make a big difference. Maybe it'll help him find his way back." Her daughter leaned against her, sleepy but thoughtful. "I liked him. He was nice." She smiled gently, brushing her daughter's hair with her fingers. "Yes, he was. And you were very kind to him, too." As they left the diner and walked home under the streetlights, the mom couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their story with the old gentleman. Something in her heart told her that their paths had crossed for a reason. She didn't know what it was yet, but she believed that sometimes life had a way of bringing people together for purposes greater than what they could see in the moment. She held her daughter's hand tighter, the night air cool against her skin. The old man's voice echoed in her mind. "Thank you for seeing me." She knew those words would stay with her for a long time. What she didn't know was how much that single act of compassion would change her life forever. The following morning began like so many others for her. The alarm buzzed far too early, the kind of sound that never failed to make her groan. She rose quietly so she wouldn't wake her daughter, tiptoeing through the small apartment as the old floorboards creaked under her tired feet. She moved slowly, making coffee in a chipped mug, setting out her daughter's school clothes and packing a simple lunch with whatever leftovers she could find. Life was a routine of stretching every penny and every ounce of energy she had, but her mind was not on the usual worries that morning. Instead, she kept thinking about the old gentleman she had met the night before. She wondered if he was safe. Had the police found his family? Did he remember who he was? His lost eyes and shaky voice lingered in her heart. She tried to push the thoughts aside as she got her daughter ready for school, but they stayed with her like a quiet echo she couldn't ignore. As they walked down the block toward the school, her daughter held her hand tightly. "Mom," the little girl said, "do you think we'll see that man again?" She smiled gently, though she had no real answer. "I don't know, sweetheart, maybe. The world has funny ways of bringing people back together." Her daughter nodded, satisfied with that answer, but the mom's own heart wasn't so easily settled. The day passed slowly. Work was the same as always, stocking shelves, answering customers with polite patience, forcing her aching body to keep moving even when she wanted to sit down. But through it all, she kept thinking about the man. She remembered the way he had held her daughter's hand for a brief moment, how his eyes had softened when he heard the child's innocent words. There had been something so human, so vulnerable in him, and she couldn't shake it. That evening, when she picked up her daughter and started the walk home, she noticed something unusual. A car was parked near her apartment building, and leaning against it was one of the officers from the night before. Her heart skipped, unsure if it was good news or bad. She tightened her grip on her daughter's hand and walked closer. "Ma'am," the officer said kindly as he stepped forward, "I just wanted to thank you again for last night. That gentleman you helped, he's resting safely. We still haven't tracked down family, but he's in good hands for now." Relief washed over her and she smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been thinking about him all day." The officer nodded. "He asked about you, actually. Said you were very kind to him. I just thought you should know." Her daughter's face lit up. "See, Mom, he remembers us." The mom felt her heart swell. She thanked the officer and walked inside, but those words stayed with her. He remembered them. Somehow, in all his confusion, he had held on to that small act of kindness. The next few days passed in their usual blur of work, school, bills, and responsibilities. But then, one evening, as she and her daughter walked home from the grocery store, she spotted a familiar figure sitting quietly on a bench outside a community center. It was the old gentleman. His coat was buttoned neatly, his shoes polished, and though he still looked a little lost, his face lit up when he saw them. Her daughter ran forward, her small voice full of joy. "Hello, sir," she called out. The old man smiled warmly, lifting a hand in greeting. "Ah, my little friend," he said softly, his voice still trembling but filled with recognition. The mom approached slowly, smiling but cautious. "How are you? Are you all right?" He nodded. "Better, I think. They've been very kind at the center here. They give me meals, a place to rest. But when I saw you, I felt like I found something familiar again." Her chest tightened at his words. She sat down beside him, her daughter climbing onto the bench between them. "I'm glad you're being cared for," she said sincerely. "We were worried about you." The gentleman looked at her for a long moment, his eyes glistening. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago," he whispered. "Someone who always believed in kindness no matter what." He paused, then shook his head gently. "I don't remember everything, but I remember how it felt to be invisible. And then, you saw me." Her throat grew tight, emotions swirling inside her. She didn't know what to say, so she simply smiled and placed her hand gently over his. Her daughter leaned against him, her innocent laughter breaking the heaviness of the moment. From that evening on, their paths began to cross more often. Sometimes they found him sitting near the center, and they would stop to chat. Other times he would wave to them from across the street, and her daughter would run over to give him a hug. It became a quiet routine, an unexpected bond formed between strangers. She noticed small changes in him. Each time they met, he seemed a little clearer, a little steadier. He still couldn't recall everything about his past, but he remembered them. That he always remembered. He would ask about her day, about her work, about her daughter's school. And though she usually kept her struggles private, she found herself opening up just a little. He listened with patience, his gentle nods and kind eyes reminding her that she wasn't as invisible as she thought. One afternoon, as they shared a simple sandwich on the park bench, the old man turned to her and asked, "Why do you give so much of yourself to others when you already have so little?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it feels like to need help and have no one notice. I don't want anyone else to feel that way. If I can make even a small difference, then it's worth it." The old man's eyes grew misty. He whispered, "The world doesn't deserve you, but it needs you." Her daughter tilted her head curiously. "What does that mean?" she asked. He smiled faintly, brushing the child's hair back. "It means your mom has a heart that shines brighter than anything money can buy." The mom laughed softly, embarrassed but touched. She didn't know then how deeply those words would echo in the days to come. As weeks went by, their bond only grew stronger. She found herself looking forward to those small encounters, the way her daughter's face lit up when she saw him, the way the old man's shoulders seemed to relax in their presence. He was no longer just a lost old gentleman. He was becoming part of their little world, someone who reminded them that kindness created invisible threads between souls. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that this bond was only the beginning. The old man she had chosen to help out of simple compassion carried a story far bigger than she could have dreamed, a story that would one day turn her life upside down in ways she never thought possible. The weather had grown colder, the kind of chill that crept into the bones and made people hurry home faster than usual. She pulled her coat tighter around herself as she and her daughter walked toward the community center one evening. They had made it a habit now, stopping by to see if the old gentleman was there. Somehow it felt natural, like visiting a relative. Her daughter carried a small paper bag with a few homemade cookies they had baked together the night before. It wasn't much, but it was their way of showing they cared. When they arrived, the old man was indeed sitting near the doorway of the center, his coat buttoned neatly and his hat pulled low. The moment he spotted them, his tired face lit up in a smile that erased years from his features. Her daughter ran forward, holding out the bag. "We made these for you," she exclaimed, her little voice bursting with pride. The man chuckled softly, taking the bag with trembling hands. "For me? Oh, you've made me a very lucky man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He opened the bag, took one bite of a cookie and closed his eyes as if savoring not just the taste but the love behind it. "These are the best cookies I've ever had." Her daughter beamed while the mom watched quietly, her heart swelling at the simple joy in his expression. They sat with him for a while, sharing small stories. Her daughter talked about school, about a song she was learning, about a funny moment with a classmate. The old man listened carefully, nodding and smiling as though every word mattered deeply. The mom shared a few small updates about work, nothing too heavy, but he listened just the same. She had grown used to the way his eyes softened whenever she spoke, as if her struggles were seen, understood, and respected. That night, as they were about to leave, the old man held her gaze. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed," he said softly. "You've given me back a piece of family." Her throat tightened at his words. She wanted to say something back, but before she could, a man in a dark suit appeared at the door of the center. He looked official, almost too polished for the humble place. He stepped forward, greeted the old gentleman with quiet respect, and then turned his eyes toward her and her daughter. "Sir," the man in the suit said to the old gentleman, "your people have been searching for you everywhere." The old gentleman frowned slightly, confusion flickering across his face. "My people?" he echoed. The man in the suit nodded patiently. "Yes, we've been very worried. You wandered off again." He paused, then lowered his voice. "It's not safe for you to be out alone." The mom looked between them, her mind racing. She hadn't expected this. "Do you know him?" she asked quietly. The man in the suit turned to her, his expression respectful. "Yes, ma'am. He's very important, though he doesn't like to speak of it. He's not just anyone. He's a man of great means." Her brows furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" The suited man hesitated, then finally said, "He is a billionaire, one of the most generous philanthropists in this country. But his health has been declining, and sometimes he forgets where he is. That's why he wanders. His family and his staff have been searching for him day and night." The mom froze, her heart pounding. She turned to look at the old gentleman, who now looked back at her with a mix of embarrassment and quiet sadness. He nodded faintly, confirming what the man had said. "I didn't want you to see me as anyone special," the old man whispered. "I just wanted to be me. And you treated me that way. That's why your kindness means so much." Her daughter's eyes widened in surprise. "You're rich?" she asked innocently. The old man chuckled softly, patting her small hand. "Yes, little one. But money doesn't make you rich. People like your mom, they do." The mom felt a rush of emotions, shock, disbelief, and something else she couldn't quite name. She had seen him only as a lost, fragile man who needed kindness, and now she was being told he was one of the wealthiest men in the country. The contrast was almost too much to take in. The man in the suit stepped forward again. "Sir, we should get you back now. Everyone is worried." The old gentleman sighed, but before leaving, he turned to the mom and her daughter once more. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of depth. "You didn't help me because of who I am. You helped me because of who you are, and I will never forget that." The mom nodded, still in shock, but managed to say, "Take care of yourself." He was guided into a car and they drove away into the night. She stood there holding her daughter's hand, her heart racing, trying to process everything. Her daughter looked up at her, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mom, he's really a billionaire?" She let out a shaky laugh, brushing her daughter's hair back. "Yes, it seems so." Her daughter grinned. "But he still liked our cookies best." The mom smiled through her disbelief. That simple truth grounded her more than anything else. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed everything in her mind. The lost man she had helped, the gentle conversations, the laughter, the bond they had formed. It all meant so much to her. And now she knew the truth. He wasn't just a lost old gentleman. He was someone powerful, someone important in the world's eyes. But what mattered most was that in his eyes she had been important too. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt certain of one thing. That night had changed everything, even if she couldn't see how yet. Life had a way of surprising her, and she had a feeling this was only the beginning of a story much bigger than she ever expected. The days after the surprising visit from the old gentleman's people passed like a dream for the single mother. She had never imagined that one small act of kindness could open so many doors. Her simple life, filled with struggles and sacrifices, was suddenly being painted with new colors she had never dared to hope for. Yet in her heart she was still the same, humble, caring, and grounded. She didn't see herself as someone special. She believed anyone in her place would have helped an old man who looked so lost. But the truth was, not everyone would have done what she did. The old gentleman himself came again to visit her, this time with a calm smile on his face and a clearer mind. He remembered her patience, her calm words, the way she made him feel safe when confusion had taken over his thoughts. He thanked her again, this time more fully explaining who he was and why he had been out wandering that day. He told her about his wealth, his companies, his long life filled with work and luxury, but also about the loneliness that often followed him. For years, people had surrounded him only for his money. That was why her help had touched him so deeply. She hadn't known who he was. She hadn't expected anything. She gave because that was her nature. She listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her little one sitting close by. For her, it was still hard to believe. She had seen wealthy people before, but only on television or in magazines. To have one sitting in her small living room thanking her was beyond anything she had ever dreamed of. Yet she stayed calm, nodding, listening, and smiling politely. The old gentleman then told her something that made her eyes fill with tears. He wanted to help her. He didn't see it as charity, but as gratitude. He wanted to give her a stable job in one of his foundations, a place where she could use her natural compassion to help others. He promised support for her child's education, saying no child with such a kind mother should ever be denied opportunities. He even offered to help her with housing, making sure she and her child would never again have to worry about losing their home. She was overwhelmed. She tried to refuse at first, saying she couldn't accept so much, but he held her hand gently and told her that life sometimes gives back in unexpected ways and she deserved it. He explained that it wasn't just about her. It was about the message she carried for the world, that kindness matters. By helping her, he was also honoring that message. Her child, sitting wide-eyed beside her, whispered softly, asking if their life was really going to change. She hugged the little one tightly and whispered back that maybe it was, but they would never forget the days when they had little, because it was those days that had taught them the value of sharing, the value of helping, the value of staying strong no matter how hard things became. In the weeks that followed, their lives did indeed begin to change. She started working at the foundation, where she met people from all walks of life. Her natural warmth and sincerity made her stand out. People admired her not for her past struggles, but for the strength and kindness she carried with her. The old gentleman often visited to see how she was doing, smiling with quiet pride at how quickly she was adjusting. He knew he had made the right choice. Her child, too, began to blossom. With proper support and better schooling, there was new energy and hope in the little one's eyes. They no longer worried about whether they would have enough to eat or if they might be forced to move again. There was stability now, something she had always prayed for. But despite all these changes, she never lost her simple ways. She still greeted her neighbors warmly. She still shared food with those in need, even when she now had more than enough. She still reminded her child every night that the most valuable thing they had was not money, but a good heart. Because it was the heart that had led them to this moment. It was the heart that had drawn a billionaire into their small world and changed everything. As months turned into years, the bond between her and the old gentleman grew stronger. He often said she was like the daughter he never had, and she treated him like family, not because of his wealth, but because of the kindness he had shown in return. Together they worked on projects through the foundation, helping others who were struggling just as she once had. Each time she met someone in need, she saw a reflection of her past self, and she poured her energy into lifting them up. One evening, as she sat on the porch of her now comfortable home, watching her child play in the yard, she thought back to the night she first saw the old man wandering the street. If she had turned away, if she had decided she was too tired or too busy to stop, none of this would have happened. That thought reminded her of something powerful. Small choices matter. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, can ripple through the world in ways we can't imagine. Her story spread quietly in the community. People who knew her were inspired. They spoke about the single mother who once had nothing, yet still gave what little she could, and how life rewarded her with blessings she had never asked for. She became a quiet symbol of hope, not through speeches or fame, but through the way she lived her life every day. The old gentleman eventually grew weaker with age, but he never felt alone again. He had her and her child as his family, filling his final years with warmth and laughter instead of loneliness. When he passed on, he left behind not just his wealth, but also his legacy of kindness. He had trusted her to carry it forward, and she did, with humility and dedication. Her life had indeed been forever changed, but what made it truly special was that she never forgot who she was or where she came from. The struggles, the nights of worry, the long hours of work, they all became part of a story she would one day share with her grandchildren. She would tell them that once their family had very little, but they always had love, and that love led them to a moment that changed everything. And so, the single mother who once walked home tired and burdened after long shifts now walked with light in her steps, her heart full, her child's future secure, and her spirit unchanged. She had proven something timeless, that when you give kindness freely, it finds its way back to you, often in ways more beautiful than you could ever imagine.